Hi, my name is Evan Yoder,
And I'm Jesse Boyer.
and today we're going to be talking about the General Motors case study. General Motors is a car and truck manufacturer, and they have the influence with Chevrolet, Buick, GMC, Cadillac, etc. A lot of American car brands, and they also have influence with international brands as well, as just as Rolling Motors and Belgium, if I get that pronunciation. With these many influences, General Motors strives to make the most efficient and safe cars as possible. Through the study, we will know one of the many innovations that GM has been working
Alrighty, so the problem that General Motors had was that the ignition switches were faulty and didn't properly work. They did not meet the torque required in the vibration environment, um, and the torque required to prevent the ignition switch from changing modes is supposed to be between 10 to 20 Newton centimeters, and it was below 10 centimeters. So the cars could potentially just shut off the engine as they were in the middle of being used.
and the concepts that we talked about for our study included general thread, digital twin, model-based enterprise, digital enterprise, and PLM. For a digital thread, uh, that would consist of GM's feedback. So throughout the process of making the new ignition switch, what they did was be able to use the feedback that they used from customers to implement new ways to improve on each iteration of the ignition switch through all the different models that GM produced. And the digital twin was shown through their 3D CAD models. So here on the left of the screen shows one of the CAD drawings that they produced to implement their design, just showing how the product worked. And their model-based enterprise was utilized through prototype. So like I said before about each iteration showing a new version of the ignition switch, they would do this by taking the advice and the feedback that they got from users to be able to tweak the design a little bit and implement it into each car model to see how it changed based on the previous cars. And the digital enterprise was used by managing the data based on the user feedback and the overall sales of the vehicle as well, and to manage the product throughout its life cycle, which brings us to PLM, which throughout its life cycle, the ignition switch had to go through many, many iterations. And it still is to this day to finally perfect it. So GM has had to see what the initial product was, the initial ignition switch was, all the way back in 2001 when they started this product, all the way to its current design.
So the different effects of GM's product here, they had to do a recall on most of the cars that were produced during that time, as well as that GM initially only wanted to report 13 deaths that uh, as of April 2014, along with 31 crashes that were caused by the faulty ignition switch. Um, However, in total, GM ended up compensating for 124 deaths. Um, GM only wanted to count uh, the incidents that resulted from a head-on collision, and instead of just um, they also only counted the people that were in the uh, front seats, like the instead of like any of the passengers, because they only wanted to count deaths that occurred because of the airbag not deploying.
Now let's talk about GM success and failures throughout our case study. So the success that we found through this process that we oversaw with GM was they were very good at utilizing user feedback. Because when you're designing some sort of innovation or a product, you got to take the user's feedback into account because you're making the product for them. So what they did was they would take user feedback, whether it was this sensor was really touchy. So they would use that feedback into consideration when improving on each iteration of the model. But just utilizing user feedback isn't everything. It doesn't mean the product is going to be perfect or even functioning in the end. And that's where GM's downfall comes in. The faulty ignition switch is not only a GM thing, other manufacturers are going into that as well. But through GM's many failures, has resulted in them losing millions of dollars to be able to continue to pursue this innovation. And it's one thing to see a product to its fruition and to see until you get to the actual perfect design that you want to. But GM has continuously lost money for it to continuously be hurting customers, resulting in many deaths. Because there is a point when you're spending way too much money for an innovation.
So we learned from this study how a major design flaw that cost the company not only millions financially, but also their reputation, um, where the issue went without fully being addressed for roughly 9 years, and uh, it went far too long without being addressed, and the company in the end paid for it, as well as like the actual value of PLM and PDM, as it forces the creation of a safer product for the public.
And it was thanks to the study that we can see the effectiveness of both PLM and PDM throughout a product's life cycle and just the process of the product. And that's all that Jesse and I have for you. Thank you for your time.